Hey there, it's me, Eden. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to my channel and visit my Patreon page for early access. Link in the comment, thanks. Tuesday, July 28th. I started to put on the Westland tee that Julie had given me, but Sarah Beth reminded me of my promise to wear all the clothes at least once. We settled on a frilly white blouse with a flower pattern, another gift of Aunt Claire that Julie wouldn't have been caught dead in. I couldn't wear the green shorts with that, so I ended up with a gray pleated skirt. Of course, that meant pantyhose, something I had usually been able to avoid, except for Sundays and other formal occasions. Flats, some dangle bracelets, a small butterfly pin on the blouse, and a white hairband in my wig set off the outfit. It bothered me that since Kevin found out my secret, I have ended up looking even more feminine than before. Mrs. Cameron commented on how nice I looked as we ate breakfast together, and Roger agreed totally and wholeheartedly. He just kept smiling at me. In the afternoon, Sarah had a lot of tests. As her healing partner, I kept her company. She had blood work, all kinds of scans, x-rays, all kinds of poking and prodding. Nobody said much of anything then, but her oncologist told her that things were still looking good, and they would have a full report for her parents and us on Friday afternoon. That report would determine the future course of treatment. Before supper, I changed into a plaid skirt and a frilly blouse, pantyhose and flats, just because I hadn't worn the skirt and blouse before, and I had promised to try everything once. And if I wore it to supper, I wouldn't have to wear it all day later in the week. Everybody said I looked nice, and 2 people asked if I had gone to a parochial school. After supper, we watched a Disney video together with some of the younger kids, and then went upstairs. Just think, I said, after I changed into my nightie. The 6 weeks is almost up. We get to go home Saturday morning. I watched Sarah's face closely, hoping to see enthusiasm. Instead, I saw worry. What's wrong? I asked. You don't want to go home? Of course, I want to go home, Annie. And I want to get away from chemo. It make me miserable. I want to be back with my family, and in my own room. But in a way I'm afraid to go home. Here, I'm just one of dozens, or hundreds, of sick kids. At home, I'll be the bald, one-legged girl, the only one in town, as far as I know. I'm just not sure I can handle the stares. Or the pity. When you go back, you get to be yourself again. I've never been this self before there anyway. At school, I mean. I know that I was home for a few weeks before we came to Hope Haven, but I'm really scared of going back to school this fall. Tears were running down Sarah's cheeks. I sat down next to her and hugged her like I do when she has chemo blues. There wasn't much I could say. Her fears were real. It would be tough going back to school. I just tried to reassure her the best I could. I know it won't be easy, Sarah Beth. Kids can be jerks sometimes. And sometimes when something makes them uncomfortable, they'll say stupid things when they don't mean to. Some kids will be afraid of me, too, she said flatly. Afraid? Yeah, I'm a living reminder that normal kids can get sick and have terrible things happen to them. I remember feeling really awkward after Betsy McCain broke her back in a car accident back in 6th grade. After she came back to school in a wheelchair, I was really uncomfortable around her. Part of it was not wanting to say something stupid. When I talked it over with Mom, she helped me realize that part of it was just being afraid. She was talking slowly and quietly. That helped, didn't it? I asked. You and Betsy get along okay. But do you know what? You are strong. Remember what I told that snotty kid back in the department store 6 weeks ago? I still believe it. You're a winner, Sarah Beth. You'll stay one. And I'll be with you every step of the way. We hugged a while longer. Wednesday, July 29th. Today, dressed in my green shorts and sherbet top again, I went over to PT with Sarah Beth and the Camerons. I was surprised to see the prosthetics team there to do a final checkup on their work. After they watched Sarah walk, they asked her to remove her prosthetic leg. They measured her and her leg and then kept it to make adjustments. The rest of the morning, Kevin and an associate gave her a refresher course on using crutches, on getting up from the ground with only one leg, and a lot of other skills for her to use whenever she needed to. There might be times she couldn't use her new leg, and she had to know how to get around without it. She agreed to leave the prosthesis there, and work with her crutches until after chemo this afternoon. So we started back to Hope Haven, with Sarah crutching and me pushing her empty wheelchair. We had just walked out into the hot summer day when I heard a familiar voice behind us. There you are. I was hoping to track down you beautiful ladies. We turned and saw Kelly Cassidy's scarred but smiling face. Even though it was a hot day, Kelly was wearing jeans and a long-sleeved plaid shirt to cover some of her scars. We all hugged like crazy. I just got off the bus a few minutes ago, and came looking for you. I have a checkup and evaluation this afternoon, to schedule my next round of plastic surgery. But I really wanted to see you and how you're doing. Great, I said. How long will you stay? Mrs. Verdugo okayed me to spend the night at Hope Haven, and I catch the morning bus out tomorrow. You two are looking great. But your hair's brown now, Annie. Is that the natural color? And those nails are fantastic. I like the new color and the new shape. And Sarah, you seem to be missing a spare part, but you look great, anyway. It was hard to believe how quiet and interned Kelly was when we first met her. We explained the drill about Sarah's leg to her, and I showed her why my hair was now brown, and was no longer firmly attached to my head. Then she wanted to know about my date with Roger. I promised to show her some snapshots that my mom and Mrs. C had taken, and maybe even try on the dress for her. But no matter what you say, I'm not marrying the dude, I insisted. Sarah sat down in the wheelchair for crossing the street to Hope Haven. Before we went in for lunch, we sat on a quiet part of the porch a while to finish catching up on our lives. I see nobody's figured out your little game of pretend, Annie, Kelly slyly grinned. I'm really glad. Well, Kevin figured it out, I admitted, sort of accidentally, like you did. He found out that I wasn't really Julie, and asked who I was. He figured I was a girlfriend. Sarah told him. He was really upset, but he finally agreed to keep it a secret. I'm afraid it might have blown my chances to study physical therapy under him, though. Sarah interrupted. But Mark, Annie, he said that he wouldn't hold it against you if you applied. We talked him into that, I thought. True, and my grades are good enough to get in, but I can't really afford it without a lot of scholarship help, and just not holding it against me won't get me those dollars. I looked back to Kelly. You know we've been planning forever to get married after we finished college. The Camerons may give Sarah Beth scholarship help from their foundation. I had hoped that if I could get a full ride in PT, maybe we could get married before college instead. Then you could be our bridesmaid that much earlier. Kelly began. I wanted to talk to you about that, but I was kind of afraid to bring it up. It was really sweet of you to ask, but I'm kind of scared about doing that. Standing up in front of a lot of people I don't know, looking like this, well, I'm afraid it would take attention away from the bride and everything. I'd love to come to your wedding, though, whenever it is. You have other friends who would be much prettier in a bridesmaid's dress, don't you? Sarah's eyes met Kelly's. Most of my friends flaked out after I got cancer, Kelly. You and Annie were there for me and hung with me. You're a very important person in my life now, and I want it to stay that way. If you're uncomfortable being in front of a crowd, I'll understand that, because I think I'll feel uncomfortable swaying and limping down the aisle as the bride. But just stay open to the idea, will you? Kelly's eyes, Sarah's eyes, and mine all misted over as the two girls hugged. About then, Mrs. Cameron, the man from the ranch who had been helping Roger, and Roger all came back from PT at Kelly. Here are some folks I want you to meet. We had a great time at lunch together, all 6 of us. Sarah Beth and I didn't connect with all the ranch talk, but it was fun seeing the others telling stories about people they knew. Kelly's dad and mom had worked on the Cameron's ranch before Kelly was born, so she had heard stories about it. After lunch, Kelly, Sarah, and I went up to our room. I had just enough time to put on the blue evening dress and the new wig, and to show Kelly the jewelry. She was duly impressed, even without seeing all the makeup and everything. I quickly changed, this time into the bandana skirt and white blouse. It sometimes got chilly in the area where they give chemotherapy treatments. We walked back over together with Kelly, who went on to see her own doctor in the burn unit. About the time we went back from the waiting area, we saw the Cameron crew come out after Roger's treatment. The children's hospital really tries to be cheerful and children-friendly, and all the staff wears really informal, bright outfits. But Disney characters on the walls and on the staff scrubs, and really helpful, cheerful staff can only go so far. Chemo is still the pits, and I'm not even the one hooked up to the IVs of poison. At least there was only one more bout of it left, for this round, at any rate. After chemo, we went back to PT so Sarah could get her leg back. When we made our way back, we heard Kelly talking with Mrs. Cameron. Roger was already sleeping off his treatment. It was clear that Mrs. C was impressed with our friend. We joined in the conversation for a while and listened to Kelly explain the next steps in her surgery. She seemed discouraged. They finally admitted that my scarring is bad enough that even with more and more surgery they'll reach a point of diminishing returns. They can only go so far, I guess, so I'd better get used to it. Sarah Beth nodded. When I started with my prosthetic leg here, I just knew that after a while I could walk perfectly. Nobody told me that, but I just assumed. Then after a few weeks of hard work, I got really discouraged. I figured that I would never be able to walk just like I used to. It was hard to accept, and I'm not sure I can completely accept it now. Mrs. Cameron then talked about how tough it was on her as a mother to have her son in such a terrible condition. I was afraid to mention my fears that my eyebrows might not grow out like they used to be. Mrs. C wanted to go check on Roger. We all agreed to go get ice cream together after supper. Sarah, Kelly, and I went back onto the porch. I was trying to figure out how to get the conversation going in a less discouraging mode, but Kelly took a new track herself. You know, she said. I might be your bridesmaid after all, if you two promise something for me. Sure, Kelly. What? I asked, innocently. Let me give you a little background before I ask you to promise. I'm dating. I was astonished, but tried not to show it. I immediately thought it would have to be either a special guy who would look beyond her scars, or a sleazebag trying to take advantage of her, figuring she'd have low self-esteem and be desperate for love. I wondered if Sarah was thinking the same thing. Kelly continued. His name's Dan. I've known him for years, because his family works on the same ranch. He joined the Navy a few months before the fire, and we'd been writing back and forth. The only times he was back on shore leave, I'd be here in treatment. He got to see me when I looked a lot worse than I do now and was full of drugs and babbling and stuff, but he kept on writing. He's served his hitch now, and he's come back. He's not pushing himself on me, but he has dropped some hints that we should think about a future together, and how many kids I'd like, and things like that. Oh, Kelly, that's wonderful. Sarah chirped. I nodded. It sounded like he might be the real thing. So what do you want us to do? Sarah asked. I would like you two to be my bridesmaids, she said. Aren't you forgetting something? I asked. Wouldn't it be better if I were a groomsman or an usher or something? Sarah looked at me and giggled. You'd be a great bridesmaid, Annie. But... I started. You're not just teasing, are you? Kelly looked right into my eyes. No, I'm not teasing. I've only known you as Annie, not as Mark. You're special to me the way you are right now. Nobody but you, Sarah, and I would know. When I saw you in the party dress earlier and realized all that you had done for Roger Cameron, I knew you would have the guts to do it for me. I was afraid to ask you before that, but I would like Annie and Sarah Beth to stand up with me. I know it scares you, Annie, but it scares me to be up in front of people looking like this, too. If we get married, it won't be a big, formal wedding. It'll probably even be outdoors at the ranch. But no matter what, I would like you two, as Sarah Beth and Annie, to be there for me. I looked over at Sarah. She looked at me and nodded. Ganged up on again. Okay, Kelly. If you'll be our bridesmaid, we'll be your bridesmaids. Sarah got up and hugged me. Thanks, Annie, she said. The strangest things make that woman happy. After supper, we joined the Cameron group to go on an ice cream expedition. There's a great campus ice cream parlor that's not wheelchair accessible inside, but it does have some sidewalk table. We were all able to climb into the Cameron's big Lincoln SUV. Roger's attendant let us all out, went to find a parking place, and joined us later. I splurged on a double chocolate sundae, and the others got delightful-looking goodies, as well. As we were finishing the treat, Roger looked at me slyly. Annie, is this our second date? Sure, Roger, I said. Then Kelly came in. Roger. I thought you were dating me tonight. I guess you're dating 3 women at once, Roger, Sarah Beth chimed in. Roger grinned. I guess I can handle that. Sarah Beth, Kelly, and I all went to the ladies' room before we left. I told them an idea. They agreed. When we came back, as the driver went to get the SUV, I excused myself to make a quick trip to the drugstore up the street, to pick up a tube of the reddest lipstick I could find. Sarah and I had just worn a light frost on our lips, and Kelly didn't have any lipstick on. So we all 3 reddened our lips, and kissed our date. Sarah left lip prints on his right cheek. Kelly put some on his left. I lifted his Stetson and planted a big one on his forehead. Roger was laughing and blushing so hard you could barely see the lip prints. Please subscribe for the next part. And visit my Patreon page for early access.